The evening air was thick with anticipation. The old manor stood silent under a crescent moon, its ivy-covered walls whispering secrets of centuries past. Inside, the grand chandelier sparkled faintly, casting a soft glow on the polished wooden floors. Tonight was different. Tonight was about discovery, about temptation. Elena adjusted the strap of her silk dress and glanced at herself in the ornate mirror. Her reflection stared back, a mixture of nerves and excitement flickering in her eyes. She had always been drawn to the manor's hidden corners, the winding hallways, the secret staircases, and most of all, the wine cellar that promised mystery and allure. Tonight, she would finally descend into its depths. She heard the soft click of the front door and the faint shuffle of footsteps. Adrian. The man whose mere presence stirred something inside her that she couldn't quite name. He had a magnetic charm, an elegance that made every room feel smaller, more intimate, when he entered. She smoothed her hair nervously, knowing that in moments, they would be alone together in the cool darkness below. Adrian approached, his tailored suit sharp against the dim light. "You look radiant," he said, his voice low and velvety. It made her pulse quicken. She smiled, a small, secretive smile, feeling the heat rise to her cheeks. "The cellar is beautiful, isn't it?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "It has character," he replied, stepping closer. "Much like you." His eyes lingered on hers, a spark of playful mischief in the depths. Elena's breath caught. The air between them seemed to hum with a silent energy, the kind that made time slow and hearts race. The staircase to the cellar was narrow and shadowed, and as they descended, the world above them seemed to vanish. The scent of oak and aged wine filled the air, earthy and intoxicating. Shelves lined with dusty bottles created a labyrinth of history and secrecy. Every step they took echoed softly, like a private symphony meant only for them. Adrian paused by a particularly old rack of bottles, reaching out to trace a finger along the labels. "Some of these wines are centuries old," he said. "Rare, exquisite, carefully preserved, much like moments meant to be remembered." His gaze flicked to hers, sharp and teasing, and she felt a shiver run down her spine. Elena wandered closer to him, the soft sound of her heels against the stone floor a rhythm in the quiet cellar. "I've always loved this place," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's something intoxicating about it. Something that makes you feel alive." "You make it sound like magic," Adrian said, smiling. "Perhaps it's not the cellar that is intoxicating, perhaps it's the company." Her heart beat faster, and for a fleeting second, she imagined them alone, surrounded by the shadows of history, sharing a secret that belonged only to them. The tension between them was palpable, a delicate thread stretched taut, ready to pull them closer. He reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. The touch was electric, gentle yet commanding. Elena's fingers trembled slightly as she let him, her eyes locking onto his. The world outside the cellar seemed to disappear, leaving only the two of them suspended in a suspended moment of anticipation. "Would you like to taste something special?" Adrian asked, holding a bottle of deep red wine. The label was faded, the glass warm in his hands. "Yes," she breathed, unable to hide the eagerness in her voice. As he poured the wine, the rich aroma filling the small space, Elena realized that the cellar was no longer just a room filled with bottles. It was a stage, a place where desire and curiosity danced, where glances and touches could speak louder than words. And tonight, she would let herself be swept into its spell. The first sip of wine was smooth, warm, and slightly sweet. Their eyes met across the glass, and in that gaze, unspoken promises lingered, teasing and thrilling. The cellar, the wine, the shadows, they all seemed to conspire together, pulling them towards something inevitable. And in the quiet, dimly lit corners of the manor's wine cellar, the game of seduction had only just begun. The candlelight flickered against the stone walls, casting shadows that seemed almost alive. Elena and Adrian stood close, the distance between them charged with a quiet, unspoken anticipation. The wine in their glasses shimmered like liquid ruby, reflecting the soft glow and the longing in their eyes. Adrian set his glass on a nearby shelf, leaning casually against the rough stone. "You know," he said, his tone teasing, "this cellar has seen centuries of secrets. Lovers, friends, rivals, all drawn here for reasons they could never fully explain." Elena's lips curved into a small, playful smile. "And now it sees us," she murmured. Her voice was soft, almost lost in the echoing walls, but it carried a weight that made him pause, noticing how her words seemed to pull him closer. "You have a way with words," Adrian said, stepping nearer. The warmth of his presence brushed against her shoulder, sending a ripple of excitement through her. Every movement he made was deliberate, slow, designed to draw her attention, to make her notice him in ways she hadn't before. She tilted her head slightly, feeling the electricity in the air. "Perhaps it's the place," she said, gesturing around the cellar, "or perhaps it's the company." Her gaze lingered on his, and for a fleeting moment, the world beyond the cellar ceased to exist. Adrian chuckled softly, the sound low and magnetic. "I think it's both," he admitted. "But you bring a spark I haven't felt in a long time." His hand brushed lightly against hers as he picked up the wine bottle again, and for a moment, their fingers touched. The contact was brief but electric, leaving a warmth that lingered long after they separated. Elena's heart quickened. She could feel the pull between them, subtle yet undeniable, a magnetic force neither could resist. She leaned slightly closer, pretending to examine the shelves of wine, but really, she was watching him, memorizing the way his eyes softened when he looked at her, the slight curve of his lips when he smiled. "Would you like to try something rare?" Adrian asked, reaching for a bottle tucked away in the shadows. The glass was dark, almost black in the dim light. "This is a vintage from a vineyard long forgotten. They say it holds memories, stories, even secrets." Elena's curiosity was piqued. "Memories? Stories? Secrets?" she repeated, her voice playful yet intrigued. "I think I'd like to taste those." He uncorked the bottle with deliberate care, the soft pop echoing softly through the cellar. As he poured the deep, velvety liquid into their glasses, their hands brushed again. This time, the contact lingered, and both of them felt it, a current, subtle but undeniable, sparking between their fingers. "To secrets," Adrian said, raising his glass. His eyes held a glint of mischief, and his smile hinted at a promise unspoken. "To secrets," Elena echoed, letting her glass meet his. The wine was rich and smooth, a warmth that spread through her chest, mingling with the excitement that fluttered like wings in her stomach. They walked deeper into the cellar, past rows of ancient bottles, until they reached a small alcove tucked away from the main space. The alcove felt private, hidden, as if the world outside had vanished completely. Here, shadows danced on the walls, flickering with the movement of their bodies. Adrian leaned against the stone wall, his gaze fixed on her. "There's something about this place," he said, his voice low and deliberate, "that makes it easier to speak honestly, to reveal what's on your mind." Elena felt her pulse race. She wanted to say something, anything that would draw him closer, yet the words seemed trapped in her throat. Instead, she let her eyes speak, letting the soft, knowing look linger, conveying a curiosity and desire that no words could capture. He took a slow step forward, closing the space between them. "Elena," he murmured, and the sound of her name felt like a caress, soft and intimate. "I've wanted to know you like this, in this space, away from everything else." Her breath hitched slightly. She could feel the tension, a delicate thread pulling them toward one another, teasing, almost unbearable in its intensity. The cellar, the shadows, the wine, they all seemed to conspire, creating a bubble where nothing existed except this moment. "Then let's not waste it," she whispered, her voice trembling with anticipation. Her fingers grazed his hand again, a gentle invitation, a spark of connection that was impossible to ignore. And in that hidden alcove, surrounded by centuries of history and the scent of oak and wine, the dance of seduction began in earnest. Each glance, each touch, each whispered word built a tension that neither could resist, a promise of something deeper, something that could not be ignored. The cellar had become a world of its own, a sanctuary where desire, curiosity, and anticipation intertwined, and neither of them wanted to leave. The alcove seemed to breathe around them, the flickering candlelight making shadows that danced like silent witnesses to their closeness. Elena's heartbeat thrummed in her ears as Adrian's gaze held hers, deep and unwavering, as if he could see every thought she hadn't yet spoken. The air felt heavy, charged with anticipation, and each movement they made seemed magnified in the quiet intimacy of the wine cellar. Adrian leaned slightly closer, just enough for her to feel the warmth radiating from him. "You have a way of making a place feel alive," he said softly. "Even somewhere as old as the cellar seems vibrant when you're here." His words were gentle, but laced with intent, drawing her in. Elena felt a shiver run down her spine. "Perhaps it's not just the place," she replied, her voice low, playful, almost teasing. "Perhaps it's the company." Her eyes sparkled, and she noticed the brief flicker of a smile cross his face, an unspoken acknowledgement of the tension between them. He reached for a bottle on a higher shelf, tipping it slightly so the candlelight caught the deep red of the wine inside. "Would you like to try this?" he asked, his hand brushing lightly against hers as he handed her the glass. The contact was fleeting but electric, leaving a warmth that lingered in her fingers long after the glass left her hand. Elena accepted it, feeling the weight of the moment press against her chest. "You always find the rarest wines," she murmured, swirling the liquid in her glass, watching the way the light played across its surface. "I suppose it's fitting, rare things tend to draw us in, don't they?" Adrian nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "Indeed," he said softly. "And sometimes, the rarest things are the most irresistible." His words were deliberate, measured, and they carried a promise that made her pulse quicken. They walked together along the narrow aisle between the shelves, their shoulders brushing occasionally, sending sparks of awareness through both of them. Every glance, every subtle movement seemed amplified in the quiet, dimly lit space. Elena realized she had never felt such a charged, delicate connection, as though the cellar itself were conspiring to bring them closer. "Do you feel it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "This tension. This pull between us." She tilted her head, a hint of mischief in her eyes, but also a vulnerability that she hadn't intended to show. Adrian's smile softened, and he took a slow, deliberate step closer. "Yes," he admitted. "I feel it, and I've felt it from the moment you entered the manor. It's subtle, yet undeniable. Like the hum of something waiting to be discovered." Elena's fingers grazed the edge of his hand, testing the connection, tracing an almost imperceptible line along the back of his palm. The touch was delicate, but it sent a current of warmth spiraling through her. "Then why wait?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly, betraying both excitement and anticipation. He tilted his head, considering her words, then smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that made her heart skip a beat. "Perhaps we shouldn't," he said softly. And with that, he closed the remaining space between them, their shoulders brushing, their breaths mingling, the air around them thick with the tension that had been building all evening. They paused, just inches apart, the flickering candlelight dancing across their faces. Every glance, every small movement seemed magnified, creating an invisible rhythm between them. Adrian's hand hovered near hers, a silent question, a gentle invitation, and Elena felt her own fingers tremble slightly as she reached for his. The cellar, with its centuries of history, became their private world, a sanctuary where every glance, every touch, and every whisper held a significance all its own. The wine's rich aroma mingled with the scent of their closeness, creating an intoxicating atmosphere that made it impossible to think about anything else. "Do you trust me?" Adrian asked, his voice low, intimate, carrying a weight that made her pulse quicken. "I do," she whispered, feeling the truth in her words. "I trust you, and I want this. I want to see where it goes." He smiled, a warm, knowing smile, and reached out to gently tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Then let's explore it," he murmured. And with that, the delicate dance of seduction continued, slow and deliberate, each movement, each glance, each breath drawing them deeper into a world where anticipation, curiosity, and desire intertwined. As the candles flickered, casting their soft, golden glow across the stone walls, Elena realized that nothing else mattered. The cellar, the wine, the shadows, all were secondary to the moment, to the connection that pulsed quietly, insistently, between them. And in that quiet, hidden corner, the game of attraction deepened, a promise that neither of them wanted to resist. The alcove felt smaller now, intimate and enclosed, as if the world outside had been erased entirely. Elena could feel the warmth from Adrian's presence pressing against her, subtle yet undeniable. Each small gesture, the brush of a shoulder, the tilt of a head, the lingering look added to the magnetic pull between them, a force she could neither resist nor fully understand. Adrian poured them both another glass of wine, the liquid glinting ruby red in the flickering candle light. He handed her the glass with a careful, deliberate motion, his fingers brushing hers again. The touch was light, almost casual, yet it left a lingering heat that traveled straight to her chest. Elena felt her pulse quicken, and she realized that the anticipation was almost sweeter than anything she could taste from the wine. "You know," he said, his voice low and warm, "there's something about hidden places that brings out honesty, vulnerability, desire." His gaze held hers, steady and intense, and she felt herself caught in it, drawn closer despite every instinct telling her to pause. "I suppose," she said, her lips curving into a teasing smile, "there's something thrilling about being in a place where no one can see you, no one can interrupt you, no one can judge." Her eyes flicked to his, and she saw that same thrill mirrored there. He stepped closer, closing the remaining space between them, his shoulder brushing hers. The movement was slow, deliberate, and it sent a shiver through her. "Then perhaps we should see just how thrilling it can be," he murmured, his breath warm near her ear. Elena's heart skipped a beat at the intimacy of his words, and she felt the tension building between them, thick and irresistible. Their hands brushed again, fingers entwining naturally, a silent promise that neither of them had yet spoken aloud. Elena's mind buzzed with excitement, the kind that made her aware of every detail: the soft flicker of the candle light, the scent of oak and wine, the warmth of Adrian's touch, and the steady, magnetic pull of his gaze. They began to explore the rows of bottles together, their movements synchronized without thought, each touch and glance a wordless conversation. Adrian would point to a bottle, explaining its vintage, and Elena would lean in closer, her fingers brushing his, feeling the heat of his body through the fabric of their clothing. Every touch, no matter how fleeting, carried an electric tension, a promise that left her breathless. "You're unlike anyone I've ever met," he said suddenly, his voice soft but intense. "There's a spark in you, a curiosity, a confidence that draws me in, even when I try to resist." His words made her cheeks flush, and she felt a thrill of excitement at the depth of his attention. "And you," she replied, her voice barely a whisper, "have a way of making me feel seen, noticed, desired." She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the flickering candle light, and felt a wave of longing that surprised her with its intensity. They reached the far end of the cellar, where a small alcove offered a sense of privacy even more pronounced than before. Adrian leaned against the stone wall, his gaze fixed on her as she approached. The wine glasses sat on a nearby shelf, forgotten for the moment, as the air between them seemed to thrum with unspoken tension. "Do you know what I've been thinking?" he asked, his voice low, intimate, and filled with promise. "I've been thinking about this moment, about the two of us, and how rare it is to feel this connection." Elena stepped closer, drawn by the warmth of his words and the intensity of his gaze. "I've been thinking the same thing," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly, betraying both excitement and anticipation. "It's unexpected, thrilling, and I don't want it to end." Adrian's hand reached out to gently tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The touch was tender, yet deliberate, sending a shiver of warmth straight through her. "Then let's not end it," he whispered, his eyes locking onto hers. "Let's see where it can take us, together." Their bodies moved slightly closer, each inch deliberate, each glance heavy with meaning. The cellar, with its centuries of history and shadows, had become a world of its own, a place where desire, curiosity, and anticipation intertwined, leaving no room for hesitation or doubt. Elena felt the pull of the moment, the irresistible tension that had been building all evening. She realized that this was more than attraction, it was a connection that thrummed through every glance, every touch, and every breath they shared. And in the quiet intimacy of the candlelit cellar, surrounded by the scent of oak and wine, they both understood that they were on the edge of something profound, thrilling, and unforgettable. The dance of seduction continued, slow and deliberate, each movement and glance deepening the connection. The cellar was no longer just a room, it was a sanctuary where anticipation and desire intertwined, and neither of them wanted to leave. The alcove seemed to shrink around them, the shadows flickering like silent spectators as Elena and Adrian lingered close. Every small movement, every brush of a shoulder, every glance, every shared breath felt magnified in the quiet intimacy of the cellar. The air between them was thick with anticipation, a charged energy neither could ignore. Adrian's hand found hers again, fingers entwining with a natural ease. "Do you feel it?" he asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. "This pull between us? It's magnetic." Elena's lips curved into a small smile, her heartbeat racing. "I do," she admitted softly. "It's overwhelming, but thrilling. Like nothing I've ever felt before." Her eyes met his, and in that gaze, a silent agreement passed between them, an understanding that neither wanted to resist the moment. He stepped closer, the warmth of his body brushing against hers, sending shivers up her spine. "Then let's embrace it," he murmured. His fingers lightly traced the back of her hand, delicate, yet deliberate, stirring a current of warmth that flowed through both of them. They moved slowly through the cellar, exploring the rows of aged bottles together. Each step, each gesture, seemed deliberate, a part of an unspoken conversation. Adrian would point to a bottle, explaining its origin or vintage, and Elena would lean in, her fingers brushing against his arm, feeling the subtle heat of his skin through the fabric of his suit. The simple touch was enough to send sparks dancing between them, a gentle fire building steadily. "You have a way of noticing everything," Adrian said softly, his gaze never leaving hers. "Every detail, every subtle movement. It's captivating." Elena felt a warmth rise to her cheeks. "And you," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "have a way of making me feel special. Seen. Desired." Her fingers grazed his as she spoke, lingering just a moment longer than necessary, and the connection between them deepened. They reached a small, hidden corner of the cellar, where a stack of wine crates created a secluded nook. The flickering candlelight painted their faces in gold and shadow, and the air seemed charged with quiet intensity. Adrian leaned against the stone wall, his gaze locked on her as she approached, her steps deliberate, her movements slow and measured. "There's something about this place," he said, his voice low, "that makes every glance, every touch, every word feel amplified. Do you feel that?" Elena nodded, swallowing slightly as the anticipation built inside her. "I do," she admitted. "It's intoxicating. Like time has stopped, and it's just us." Adrian's fingers brushed a strand of hair from her face, a tender, deliberate gesture that made her pulse quicken. "Then let's not waste it," he whispered. "Let's savor this, every moment, every glance, every heartbeat." The warmth of his hand lingered near her cheek, and Elena felt a shiver of excitement run through her. She took a small step closer, closing the space between them further. The cellar, with its scent of oak and wine, felt like a cocoon, a private world where nothing else existed except the tension and connection between them. Adrian's eyes softened as he watched her, a quiet intensity in his gaze that made her breath catch. "Elena," he murmured, "I've been waiting for this, for you, for a moment like this. And now that it's here, I don't want to let it go." Her heart raced, and she felt the thrill of anticipation, the pull of desire that had been building all evening. "I don't want it to end either," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "It feels right. Perfect. Like it was meant to happen here, now." He smiled, a slow, deliberate smile, and reached out to hold her hand fully, their fingers interlaced. "Then let's see where it takes us," he said softly. And with that, the subtle dance of seduction continued, deliberate and magnetic, each gesture and glance deepening the connection between them. In the candlelit alcove, surrounded by centuries of history and the scent of wine and oak, the world outside ceased to exist. All that remained was the quiet, irresistible pull between them, the unspoken promise that this moment, this connection was only just beginning. And in that intimate space, Elena realized that the wine cellar had become more than a hidden room, it had become a sanctuary of anticipation, desire, and whispered possibilities, where each heartbeat and every glance carried a story all their own. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows across the stone walls, creating a private world for Elena and Adrian. Each glance, each movement, seemed magnified in the stillness of the cellar. Their hands were still entwined, fingers brushing in gentle, deliberate strokes that sent sparks of warmth through both of them. The quiet intimacy was almost overwhelming, yet neither wanted to break it. Adrian took a slow step closer, closing the remaining space between them. "You have a way of making even the simplest moment feel extraordinary," he said softly. His voice was low, magnetic, carrying a weight of sincerity that made Elena's heart flutter. "Being here with you, it feels right. Natural." Elena's lips curved into a soft smile, and she felt a shiver run down her spine at the tenderness in his tone. "I feel the same," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "I've never felt so present, so aware of everything between us." They moved toward a small wooden crate stacked near the far end of the cellar. The space was tight, intimate, almost cocoon-like, giving them a sense of privacy that made every touch feel more electric. Adrian gently lifted a candle from the shelf, carrying it to a small ledge so that its light illuminated their faces. The warm glow highlighted the intensity in his eyes and the soft anticipation in hers. "Do you know what I love about this?" he murmured, his hand brushing against hers as he poured a bit of wine into 2 glasses. "It's not just the cellar, or the wine, or even the secrecy. It's the way it brings us closer physically, emotionally, entirely." Elena's breath hitched slightly at his words. She felt a warmth rising in her chest, a delicate tension that had been building all evening. "I feel that too," she admitted, her fingers brushing lightly along the back of his hand. "It's intoxicating, how close we are, and how easily it feels to just be with you here." He smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that made her pulse quicken. "Then let's not rush anything," he said softly, his gaze steady and inviting. "Let's enjoy this, each touch, each glance, each moment. Let's let it unfold naturally." Elena nodded, feeling the thrill of anticipation deepen. She took a careful step closer, their shoulders brushing, their breaths mingling in the quiet warmth of the cellar. Every small movement, the tilt of a head, the brush of a hand, the lingering eye contact felt amplified, a language of its own that spoke louder than words. They raised their glasses in a silent toast, the rich aroma of the wine filling the small space. The taste was smooth and full-bodied, lingering on the tongue, much like the unspoken tension between them. Their eyes met across the glasses, and in that gaze, there was a shared acknowledgement of the connection that had been quietly building all evening. "Every moment with you feels rare," Adrian said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Like it's meant to be savored. Every glance, every touch, every word." Elena's heart raced. "I feel that too," she replied softly, her hand brushing along his as they set the glasses aside. "It's thrilling, how something so simple can feel so intense." They stood together in the quiet alcove, the candlelight dancing across the stone walls, the scent of wine and oak filling the air. The cellar seemed to shrink around them, a private world where anticipation, curiosity, and desire intertwined seamlessly. Adrian's hand lifted to gently tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was tender, deliberate, intimate. Elena's pulse quickened, and she felt a shiver of warmth run through her. "You have a way of making everything feel significant," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "And you," he replied softly, "make me feel alive. Every glance, every touch, every moment with you, it's electric." For a few moments, they simply stood there, eyes locked, hands brushing, breathing in sync. The tension was thick, almost tangible, yet neither rushed to break it. The cellar had become a sanctuary, a place where the connection between them could deepen naturally, where anticipation and intimacy were allowed to coexist. Elena realized that this was more than desire, it was connection, a magnetic pull that went beyond simple attraction. And in the candlelit shadows of the wine cellar, surrounded by centuries of history and the scent of oak and wine, they allowed themselves to simply exist together, savoring the anticipation, the closeness, and the unspoken promise that lingered between them. The world outside the cellar faded into irrelevance. Here, in the quiet intimacy of shadows and flickering light, Elena and Adrian discovered a rare closeness, a tension both thrilling and gentle, building towards something unforgettable. The wine cellar was quiet, yet alive with a soft hum of energy that seemed to pulse between Elena and Adrian. The flickering candlelight made shadows dance across the stone walls, wrapping them in a cocoon of intimacy. Every glance, every subtle movement, carried the weight of anticipation that had been building all evening. Adrian reached for her hand once more, his fingers intertwining with hers with a deliberate gentleness that made her pulse quicken. "Elena," he murmured, his voice low and magnetic, us, it feels like something rare, something worth savoring. Don't you feel it?" She nodded, a soft smile brushing her lips. "I do," she whispered. "It's more than I expected. More than I imagined. Being here with you, it feels perfect, like it was meant to happen." He stepped closer, and the warmth of his presence enveloped her. The space between them was almost non-existent now, every brush of their shoulders or hands sending small sparks of awareness through them both. Elena's heart beat faster, not from fear, but from a thrilling sense of closeness she had never experienced. "Shall we?" he asked softly, his gaze never leaving hers, holding her in a moment suspended in time. "Yes," she breathed, the single word carrying the weight of her anticipation. Their hands remained entwined as they moved to a small alcove, one tucked behind racks of wine bottles, hidden and private. Here, the world outside the cellar felt distant, almost irrelevant. The scent of oak and aged wine wrapped around them, mingling with the subtle warmth between their bodies, creating an atmosphere thick with intimacy. Adrian's hand lifted to gently cup her cheek, his thumb brushing lightly across her skin. "You have a way of making even the quietest moments feel alive," he whispered. "Every glance, every touch, it's unforgettable." Elena's fingers traced the line of his jaw, soft and deliberate. "And you," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "make me feel seen, wanted, appreciated." The words hung between them, delicate yet powerful, a confession unspoken yet fully understood. They leaned closer, foreheads nearly touching, their breaths mingling in the dim light. The cellar seemed to shrink around them, every shadow and flicker of candlelight accentuating the closeness, the connection, the anticipation that had built over the evening. Adrian's hand moved to gently hold hers against his chest, feeling the quick rhythm of her heartbeat. "I've wanted this," he said, voice low and sincere, "from the moment I saw you. And now that it's here, I don't want to let it slip away." Elena smiled softly, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "Neither do I," she whispered. "Every second here, every look, every touch, it feels like it matters more than anything else." They paused, simply savoring the quiet, the warmth, the unspoken understanding that existed between them. Then, slowly, deliberately, Adrian leaned closer, his lips brushing hers in a soft, tentative kiss. The touch was gentle, electric, a spark that seemed to ignite the quiet air of the cellar. Elena responded naturally, her hands resting against his shoulders, feeling the steady warmth of his body. The kiss deepened slightly, not rushed, but deliberate and full of meaning. It was a kiss that spoke of curiosity, connection, and a delicate passion that neither had yet fully expressed. When they finally pulled back slightly, their foreheads rested against each other, breaths mingling in the quiet intimacy. "This," Elena murmured, a smile tugging at her lips, "is more than I imagined. More than I hoped for." Adrian's eyes softened, a warmth radiating from his expression. "And it's just the beginning," he whispered. "This, us, it's rare, and it's ours." They lingered in the alcove, hands still entwined, hearts still racing, savoring the quiet closeness that had grown over the course of the evening. The cellar, with its history, its shadows, and the scent of wine, had become more than just a hidden room. It had become a sanctuary, a place where connection, anticipation, and intimacy could flourish naturally. The candlelight flickered one last time as they held each other close, the warmth between them settling into a gentle, steady rhythm. Outside, the world continued on, but inside the wine cellar, time seemed suspended. Elena and Adrian had discovered not just attraction, but a rare closeness built on trust, anticipation, and shared moments that felt timeless. And as they finally allowed themselves to simply exist together in the quiet intimacy of the wine cellar, both knew that this was a night, a connection, and a memory that would linger long after the candles burned out.